The title of our presentation is Multiliteracies and Democracy, the Unequal Representation of Albanian Migrants in Greek Mass Culture Texts. The present study aims to explore the ways in which the dominant discourse of nationalism is reproduced and reinforced through the representation of minority people in Greek television. TV mass culture texts often use humorous representations of minority groups to reinforce the linguistic and cultural dominance of nation-states. This denigration of the minorities indicates their unequal treatment by the majority and the restrictions of their freedom. In other words, this humorous stigmatization shows the undermining of democracy. In this context, based on the multiliteracies model, we designed tentative teaching proposals to help the students to explore that through the humorous stigmatization of the Albanian migrants is reproduced the dominant discourse of nationalism in Greek television. We could say that our tentative proposals are designed to raise students' critical literacy and to enhance them to identify the inequalities reproduced through the humorous representations in TV mass media. Discourse is defined as the specific ways of viewing and constructing social reality. These ways of representing the social world are ideologically charged since they construct specific meanings as dominant, self-evident, and natural. Such a dominant and naturalized discourse is the national discourse, which was widely developed in the 19th century during the process of constituting Western nation-states. National discourse projects the nation-states as autonomous institutional and administrative constructions that stretch beyond the distinct limits of a specific geographical area. However, the intense mobility of the population seemed to distort the borderlines between national construction and cast doubt on the strict linguistic and cultural delimitations. The nation-states, in their effort to protect the interior linguistic and cultural homogeneity, activate various discriminatory defensive mechanisms. The discrimination proves to be one of the most efficient means for the achievement of national homogenization. From this perspective, the discrimination constitutes a basic tool of the nation-state, as it can drastically contribute to achieving the ideal of homogenizing the nation-state, banishing or assimilating diversity on the basis of its disdain. This unequal discrimination at the expense of minority groups and the exploitation of power by the majority and dominant groups comprise an undermining of the discourse of democracy. More specifically, nation-states are constructed as pure, fixed, stable and homogeneous linguistically and culturally entities. Monolingualism and monoculturalism are perceived as innate and necessary characteristics of the person who participates in the social goods offered by the state. Now let's define the term democratic discourse. In this presentation, we do not approach the term democracy as competition between political parties for the right to exercise political power. In other words, we do not approach democracy as a form of government that is at the service of the national discourse. We approach the democratic discourse as the political vision in which the society is governed by the following two main characteristics. The freedom, which is the ability of a person to express his or her own opinion participating in social issues, and equality, which is the ability of equal power relations and rights during the participation in the social processes. So, from our point of view, we strongly believe that the enhancement of national discourse and homogeneity question the democratic discourse, undermining the freedom and the equality of the minority groups. This position is confirmed by studies which reveal that Greek mass media and mostly television tend to confirm the dominance of the majority group and to dismiss minorities so that homogeneity and national unity is upheld. The consciousness of the inequalities reproduced through mass culture texts is crucial. as mass culture frames collective memory and common experiences, thus bringing together viewers from different backgrounds. And the main aim of the contemporary education is the development of students' consciousness to be aware that the text reproduces inequalities and peer-specific ideologies. Contemporary pedagogical approaches focus not only on the function of a text, but also on its critical reading and analysis. Being aware of the power relations and ideological positions reproduced in text comprises the basic object of the pedagogical approach of critical literacy. In this sense, the revealing of power relations makes critical education a democratic education. As Katsaru characteristically points out, the cultivation of the critical literacy in the classroom equals to a lesson of democracy. By referring to a lesson of democracy, we do not mean that democracy can be taught. We believe that democracy can only be experienced, and through the democratic and anti-democratic experiences of the subjects and the reflection on the resulting experiences can achieve the learning. The experiencing of the students is exploited mostly in the pedagogical model of multiliteracies, the model which we exploit for the designing of our teaching proposals. This model is inherently inspired by a democratic character, since it aims at language teaching through the study of the students' out-of-school practices. Multiliteracies aim to cultivate critical thinking of the future democratic citizens through the following four cognitive processes. Experiencing, conceptualizing, analyzing, and applying.
The next process of the multiliteracies model is experiencing. Experiencing, it concerns the exploitation of texts from students' everyday life and their broader socio-cultural environment. In our teaching proposals, we exploit an expert from a TV mass culture text. Mass culture texts are texts which make up a substantial part of the children's out-of-school reality. Therefore, the students can bring into the classroom these texts to be analyzed and examined. The use of the students' out-of-school practices in the teaching process makes the students co-creators of the teaching process, active participants and not passive receivers of default knowledge. This way, the students get a voice, they cooperate with the teacher and make decisions. Finally, in that context, teachers and students negotiate and share equally the power, which contributes by itself to the cultivation of democracy in the classroom. The next process is conceptualizing, where students could explore the ways in which certain terms and phenomena contribute to the organization, composition, and comprehension of texts. Students, after relevant discussions with teachers, could provide brief theoretical descriptions of how specific terms and phenomena contribute to the production, comprehension, and interpretation of a text. Students are asked to create a glossary, like Wiki, and write a comprehensible theoretical description about national discourse and democratic discourse. As regards with the national discourse is related to the terms nation-state, denigration, discrimination, inequality, and majority groups. As regards with the term democratic discourse is related to the terms equality, democracy, solidarity, and minority groups. We move on to analyzing, where the aim is to critically interpret a text within its social cultural framework. Here, we analyze an expert from the TV series In Law from Tirana. Let's see a brief description of the series case. In a town of central Greece, Penny and Lycurgos Dalaouras are expecting for summer vacation their daughter Lisa, who is studying and living permanently in London. She comes with her boyfriend, Alfred, who originates from Albania. Lisa, afraid of the reactions of her parents, does not reveal the nationality of Alfred. Due to some coincidences, her parents believe that Alfred is a British noble. However, one day Lisa confides in her mother that Alfred is Albanian, and then her father gets to know it. The excerpt we quickly analyze comes from the 10th episode of the series. Let's analyze an excerpt from the TV series In-Laws from Tirana. Some issues that could be discussed during the cognitive process of analyzing are the following. How is Alfred represented by Lisa's parents regarding his education, his musical background, or his financial situation? Secondly, according to Lisa's parents, what are Alfred's motives for this wedding? How do Lisa's parents characterize their daughter because she wishes to marry Alfred? Why do they characterize her like that? So, in that psychological condition, are Lisa's parents when they find out about their daughter's forthcoming wedding with an Albanian person? What kind of attitude do Lisa's parents seem to have towards people of Albanian origin? Which discourse do Lisa's parents promote through their words? Do they promote the national or the democratic discourse? Which discourse does Lisa promote through her words? Does she promote the national or the democratic discourse? In this framework, the students realize that Lisa's parents treat Alfred unequally and in a racist way because of his Albanian origin, and they become aware that the negative attitude of Penny and Lycurgos is enhanced and reinforced by the national discourse. The last process of the multiliteracies model is transform practice. Transform practice relates to the realization of this ideological and political dimension of this text contributes so that the students themselves function as political beings. The awareness of the inequality will possibly lead them to the questioning of the power of the majority groups and the promotion of equality and the democratic discourse. Social action and the political or ideological choice of students themselves is revealed mostly in the framework of the transform practice where the children transfer this text in a different socio-cultural framework or they create a new text in a new socio-cultural framework. In this context, students working cooperatively can present the above excerpt of In-Law from Tirana in different social groups, such as majority groups, minority groups, like Albanian migrants that live in Greece a lot of years, or German tourists in Greece, or employees in a non-governmental organization that support migrants and refugees. After this, they could discuss their different perceptions, their different reactions, and the discourses related in each case. Also, students can transform specific words of the above excerpt by considering that Lisa's parents are positive in her marriage to an Albanian. In these different versions of the story, which discourses are promoted, the national or the democratic? Finally, in the same wavelength, it would be interesting to transform the above text, considering that the groom is a non-Albanian foreigner, but a citizen of a socially and economically developed European country. In this case, how would Lisa's parents probably react to her independent marriage, and from which discourses their reaction would draw upon? Finally, students can create an excerpt of a daily screen TV series through which the democratic discourse will be promoted, namely the equality and the freedom of the people. Proceeding to the conclusions, at first we proposed some indicative activities for the educational exploitation of the unequal representation of Albanian migrants in Greek TV mass culture texts, aiming at developing the students' critical literacy. In this framework, students could be naturalize national views and practices by constructing and disseminating democratic discourse that are different from the competing with the hegemonic national discourse. This teaching process could help the students be aware of the inequalities reproduced and could enable them to build a more democratic identity as future adults. So, all the above mentioned educational suggestions are not yet implemented in class. For the implementation of these suggestions and for their transformation into tangible teaching activities, we propose that each teacher could function as an ethnographer and could take into consideration factors such as students' age, their ethnicity, their interests, and the available teaching time. It is finally important to highlight that such teaching activities could be deemed by the teachers as unsuitable and dangerous issues, but and as a threat by both the students of a migrant refugee and of a majority origin. Therefore, the teachers, in their effort not to influence the composition and the dynamic of the class, often provide a negative stance towards the critical teaching approaches, and they prefer the ideological naturalist class. However, a critical stance to this institution of the national education itself could help to realize that the smooth and controlled management of the class very often maintains and naturalizes sociolinguistic and sociocultural inequalities. Here are some references we used for our study. Thank you very much for your attention.